Today on The Art of Lifing at Work, we are going to explore the dynamic of happiness among employees. And in part of our series, I'm so excited to welcome back Gillian Mandich, Canada's first happiness doctor. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
And I love this topic too, because we all have jobs where we work in some capacity,
Yes.
and we all want to be happy.
Yes.
So those two, oftentimes we don't put them together necessarily, or we think that we do. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of things that we can do to really tie them together.
Absolutely. Okay, so I have so much I want to ask you around this. I do corporate workshops at different companies where we really look at creating a happy culture, because there is so much research, as you know, that happy employees perform better, they stay longer within a company, they work harder, they're more innovative, right? I don't need to tell you this.
Yes.
But I think that, and what I try to help corporations look at is how they can incorporate gratitude-centered leadership to create happier employees, because it's not a metric that most corporate companies have, right? So when you look at like an annual review and all the goals you have, how happy you are in your job isn't normally as part of that development process. And they might do a survey to see, okay, how happy are employees overall? And so I think, though, that so many people leave jobs because of a bad boss, or they're not feeling inspired in their work. So often it's not just about money.
Yes.
And so happiness is a critical metric at work, right? So let's start from an employer's perspective. I've got a group of employees. How important is it that we focus on their happiness, and what can an employer do to help make their culture happier?
Yeah, I love this conversation because, especially in today's day and age, a job isn't just you go in, you punch a clock, and you leave. There's so much more to it than that. It's the relationships that you have, the feeling of satisfaction, the feeling of accomplishment. There's so much more than just working from, say, 9 to 5.
Yeah.
And
I would say it's like it's mind share that we're looking for from employees today, right? With technology being the way that it is,
it's true.
It's more important that we have an employee engaged versus the time they're clocking in, right?
And even if you think about it for yourself, if you're in a good mood and you're feeling happy, the day is just a little bit brighter, right? You're more motivated to do your work. When you do your work, you enjoy it more. You might spend more time connecting with people and enjoying those relationships, or feeling more productive at the end of the day. Because whether we realize it or not, our feelings and our work are not separate things. Right. They are interconnected. And so, especially as an employer, it's so important to consider even, what are the things in my workforce that are making my employees happy? And what are the things that don't? And inherently with most jobs, there are going to be things that we don't like. That's part of the process. And there are going to be things that we can do to make them things better as well. Right. And so oftentimes, if you're not sure where to start, ask your employees. I know that sounds like sort of so elementary, and yet it's so often, especially when I go into a corporate setting and I say, okay, well, what makes your employees happy? They're like, I don't know, or you guess, but we don't know what we don't know. And so, especially my PhD is in health science, and health promotion is my area of specialization. And if you're looking to promote health or workplace health, physical health, whatever it is, the best place to start is with what we call a needs assessment, where we actually go out and figure out what the needs are and then how to meet them, as opposed to me coming in as the boss and saying, this is what you need to do to be happy. Yeah. And when it becomes a conversation where it becomes inclusive, that's when you start to really see that employee engagement go up, and also the workplace environment, the culture, all of that start to shift, because it's really the people that create the culture. You don't dictate the culture.
It's so true. So, I've worked with a number of different business owners where we talk about gratitude-centered leadership and making happy, or helping cultivate happy employees. And one of the questions I ask in the workshop is, how happy are you in your work and your life? So let's not separate them, because I think there isn't a lot of separation. So I'll ask them to give themselves a grade, right? Like an A+ or a B, or, that sort of thing. And many of these entrepreneurs especially grade themselves high because they're doing what they love, I think. Yeah. And so despite the challenges they have, they own their business and they're doing it. Then I will ask them partway through the workshop, okay, so if you think about the employees that report directly to you, that you're responsible for their cultivation, if you had to take a guess as to how happy they are in their work and life, what grade would you give them? And a lot of them will say, well, I don't really know. And I say, okay, well, I kind of push a little bit and say, intuitively, tell me what you think. They grade them lower. the pattern I've seen in many instances over and over is that they grade them lower. So then my question to them is, okay, so we know statistically that the research and the data shows that happy employees perform better for your business. And so then, and in your own work, you're happier, like you're grading yourself. So then if you're grading your team members at a lower score, then it's time that we think about what are the things that we can do to help change that climate. And sometimes it's not even change it, but just improve it or up the ante a little bit, right? Yeah.
And I love what you said too about work not being separate from our personal life, because that's an important element to consider as well. And oftentimes if you look at who are the companies that are doing this really well right now, how are they building that culture? How are they working to improve employee happiness? A lot of times what they're doing is outside of the traditional work sort of picture. So it's creating opportunities for employees to have gym memberships, or to have time to go for a massage during work hours, or work with a personal trainer, or do these different activities that are linked to work and aren't necessarily top of mind what you would think in terms of how to improve productivity. Because we are humans that don't just live in separate silos, like work silo, personal life. If you're having a really bad morning, say your kids are being really difficult, you're late, you're stressed, you're rushed out the door, you forgot stuff.
I know that all too well.
And then you show up at work and you're frazzled and you're stressed and you're overwhelmed. Are you going to work the same type of productivity and output, as opposed to you had a lovely morning, your kids were waiting for you at the door, there was no traffic on the way, right?
Like perfect fantasy.
And yet if you think about yourself in those two situations and then you walk through the doors of your work, that how you are in that moment starts to affect your day, right?
Okay, so I have a question for you about this then. You know, so often in business, when you're going in from a sales perspective and or pitching, and I've been in boardrooms where we've got $1 million pitch on the line or multi-million-dollar pitches on the line, where everything is like at stake, and we will fake it till we make it. You know, and especially when you're in growth mode in a company, you're doing things you've never done before. Can this be done? Of course, it can be done, and you know that confidence sort of breeds that trust, right? And so my question is that so often business success comes from like faking it till you make it and you figure it out. In happiness, can you fake it till you make it? Like, can you force yourself to smile and say, I'm going to be happy today? Does that work in changing your mood?
So that's a really interesting question. And it's really cool, because even when you look at like fake it till you make it, I think that there is truth in that, and it's not a hard and fast rule. So I think underlying that, it comes down to, what are you faking? And are you being realistic with what you're doing and you're just acting like as if, or are you being unrealistic and faking it? Like, for example, you know, if you see yourself like
I couldn't be a brain surgeon.
Right.
Like, I couldn't walk into an operating room and fake it till I make it.
Exactly. Like, there's certain situations where we can be realistic and optimistic and hopeful, and then there's a point where we need to also be realistic and see that. So that kind of piece aside, when we look at happiness in particular, if there, like, a lot of happiness comes back to our mindset and what we're looking at and what we're focusing on. And so if we're not in a good mood, sometimes then starting to do things to shift our mood can help to change our mood. So for example, myself, if I'm really grumpy, my boyfriend will be like, okay, Gillian, well, what are 3 things you're grateful for? And I'll be like, I'm grateful for, right? You start off like that. And then as you go and you start talking about things that you're grateful for, it actually starts to shift your mood a little bit. So it's not about like faking that mood, but it's about creating triggers or things that can shift your mood. But then interestingly, there's research that was done with people that smile. And so the researchers brought people into a lab and they had to, I don't have a pencil with me, so imagine my finger as a pencil, they bite on the pencil, and then it forces almost like a smile in your mouth. And then a second group of people were brought in and they had to put the pencil in front of their teeth, so like this.
We're like looking grumpy.
I know, right? So you have a frown. And the research is a little bit controversial because of some of the data and the stats that were run. And overall picture, one of the key takeaway messages is that when you smile, there's muscles that fire, right? Your orbicularis oculi that goes around your mouth, and also that draws the corners of your mouth up towards your cheeks. So you have a couple muscles that fire when you smile. And then those muscles, when they fire, they send a signal to your brain. And then your brain, it's telling your brain, hey, you know, Gillian's smiling right now. And your brain doesn't sit there and say, well, why is she smiling? Right? Your brain just says, oh, she's smiling. Let me release some serotonin, some dopamine. Let me do that because she must be happy because she's smiling. So in that particular case, sometimes when you're in a really difficult situation, or even people make fun of me all the time, if I'm at the gym and I'm having a really hard workout, I'm always smiling because I feel like it's changing my state a little bit, changing my brain. So that's kind of this tool that we have when we're going through difficult things. And it's not to be unrealistic or not to say that to minimize what you're going through. Yeah. And when you smile, you're sending a signal to your brain to tell your brain you're smiling. Right.
Okay, so this is off work related for a second, but I just feel like I need to share. So I was in labor with my first boy, and I walked into the hospital maternity ward, and they often will gauge whether you're ready to be admitted based on how much pain you're in. Yes. Sorry, expectant moms, I don't want to ruin this for you. But I walked into the counter and I had a big smile on my face, and they said, "Oh, honey, you're not ready. Like, you're fine." And I'm like, but like I'm barely breathing when the contractions come. And the nurse said to me, "But you're smiling." And it was funny because I didn't think there was anything weird about that, because I said, "I'm excited. I'm gonna have a baby. I'm excited." And so it did actually, like, not that it minimized the pain, but it sort of almost, it did help sort of almost soften it, if I could say that.
Yeah.
So you can't smile through birth, just I think it's still painful. But that's a really interesting point, though, is that it's mindset. So this is an interesting question, I think. When I worked at a corporate company that was going through a global restructuring at one point, it was a private company, and I felt like they really did the right thing, and they made a global announcement and said, over the course of the next year, we are going to be restructuring. That means that some jobs will be eliminated. There will be other jobs that will be created in the process, and they had a program that they called Paddle Your Own Canoe. And so
Canadian.
Right. And so the idea was that we want you to navigate your own future. And I was working in PR, and I loved my job, and I made it a point to try to be really good at my job. I always feel like that's the best job security you can have. Yeah. So I kind of wasn't really worried. I was like, if the job doesn't, if my job is eliminated, I will find something else. But my goal at that point was I wanted to grow, and I wanted to sort of move out of the company anyway. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go out and look for other opportunities while I'm here. So I'd be working during the day, and then it was like a full-time job after work, and I'd be like sending out resumes. I was shocked at how many of my fellow coworkers felt scared, didn't know if they were going to get a job, complained incessantly about it, but actually didn't take any action. And they got stuck in that trap. So my question to you, that long-winded version, but my question to you would be that if you're not happy at work, are there things that you can do to try to make your situation better? And how would you know when it's time to leave or when it's time to stay? If you use happiness as that metric, can you guide us through that?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a really key thing, because in our job, we're probably going to have things that we love and things that we don't. Yes. So that's inherent in any job. So we can take that out of the equation, because we're in an ideal world, probably throughout the day, there are going to be things that we do as a means to an end, as opposed to everything bringing you joy. And can you bring more things that bring you joy or make you happy? Absolutely. So that kind of piece aside, when you think about your job, like I talked about before, there are things that you can control and things that you can't. And the best way in order to psychologically set yourself up for success is to focus on the things that you can control. So you can control, like you said, if you're doing the best job possible at your job, if you're showing up every day and trying really hard, if you're putting in the effort and the cognitive energy that you are capable of, that's all you can control. Restructuring, companies getting sold, things closing and opening, whatever, you can't control those things. And if you put your focus there, then it's almost setting yourself up, or a recipe to not be happy. Right. And the other piece that's really important is that action piece that you touched on. Because if you're not happy, nobody's going to make you happy. Nobody's just going to come one day and serve on a platter to you. Here's your perfect job. Would you like it? Yes. That doesn't happen.
Happiness doesn't happen to you, right? You have to practice it.
And you have to actually go out and do something. Yes. It is that two-way street. Yes. And especially when we think of it in terms of the workplace, then you recognize that your work isn't going to inherently make you happy. You're going to contribute to the work, and it's going to be a collective thing that boosts your happiness, both for yourself and for everyone around you. It's not just going to be something that happens to us. And if we are not happy now, then it starts to say, okay, well, let's be solution focused. Like I always have this rule. I've been implementing it recently. I learned it from a friend of mine, and I love it. You're allowed to complain to me twice before, or vent twice before you start to tell me about what action you're taking.
Oh, I love
that.
Right?
Because we all need to vent sometimes. There's nothing wrong with that, especially in a safe space to get things off our chest. And when venting becomes a chronic thing, that's when we run into trouble. So yes, figure out where you're not happy, and then get solution focused. Right. Start thinking, okay, well, even within that, there are going to be things that you can control, things that you can't, so you focus on the ones that you can, and then you start to take action. Yes. I heard, I was listening to Derek Sivers on Tim Ferriss's podcast a while ago, and he had this quote, and I love it. I use it all the time in my talks. He said, if more information was the answer, we'd all be billionaires with perfect abs. Right? Yes. Because it's so true. Knowing all these things, knowing like all the evidence-based things that I can share with you in order to make you happy, that's all well and good. If you don't take any action, that's all it is. It's just something I said today that you watched on YouTube. Right?
Oh, yes.
So it really, the action piece and doing something about it. And I say that, and it's not an easy thing to do. And we start there, and then we focus on the things that we can control, and we, over time, start to shift.
I love that. Okay, so takeaways. A couple things that I do in my workshop that I think are worth sharing is, one is I ask employers to, first of all, measure happiness. So ask your employees how happy they are.
You don't know what doesn't get measured, doesn't get managed. Right?
Exactly. And I, you've talked about the longevity of it. So feeling happy in the moment or feeling happy overall. So it's important when you're measuring happiness to ask employees, even to give a percentage of the last 3 months, how many of the days did you go home feeling happy, or did you come to work feeling happy? And then ask your employees to describe a past day in the last 3 months or the past year that they felt the happiest at work, because that can give both you as an employer and the employee an indicator of the things that they love to do. And so I ask employers to do that. And for employees, what I ask, and I think this is such a good point that you brought up, is that take charge of the situation yourself. So what I say is, think about the days that you were the most happy, the things that you love to do the most, and then communicate, because quite often we assume that somebody knows, and if we don't have the conversation, they don't know. I always tell my kids, I can't read your mind. You've got to find those words and tell me how you feel. And so when you ask, if you do something and you ask, you sort of take that fear, put it aside, and go and ask, have an open conversation. In most healthy workplaces, that's a good thing. If you come and say, you know what, I evaluated the things that made me the happiest in my work over the past year, and these were the things that I loved to do. And so how can I do more of those to help the business grow? So asking those questions is really important. And then I think, the big thing you gave me today is take action. So it's not just about thinking about it. It's not about wallowing in it. Take action. So vent twice and then come with a solution and take that action, right?
Absolutely. Because especially in a corporate setting, it can be so easy to get caught up on deliverables or the white papers or that, and to recognize that there's emotion and feeling behind all of that. And when we can bring that into the equation, that's going to be the recipe for success, both in terms of your employees and in terms of the work and the output.
Yes. I think those types of emotions are what connect us human to human. And I think business is built on relationships and trust at the end of the day. So I think all too often we've tried to separate work and life. They're two separate things. We've almost tried to sterilize work. So, don't put any emotion into the work that you do. But in all my experiences, I've been at some very high stakes meetings with some of the world's most renowned brands, not even realizing how much was at stake when I was in there. But I found that when you feel passionate about something, when you show that emotion, it connects you with people. So I think that's the other takeaway today, is that happiness at work is something that we don't necessarily have to think that emotions are something we should put away. Happiness can be a key metric both in our life and work, and that we can embrace emotions in work, because emotions drive us as human beings.
We're not robots.
We're not robots, and so therefore it drives our work as well.
Exactly.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Gillian.
you.
Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed the content, then please like it and share it with anybody that you think might be interested in this content as well. I would also love it if you could subscribe to my channel. I put out new videos every Tuesday. And last but not least, if you have any comments, I would love to have a conversation with you. Let's do this journey together. Let's master the art of lifing and really do life on purpose.